So we are moving into our final unit for the semester now, and there are two assignments that go together for this, which is your final microtheme and your final essay. We are still looking at writing as a process by having these two assignments together. So you can't just write something and turn it in and call it done. Microtheme 6, your final microtheme, is there in place to kind of in a way force you, I guess, to work ahead and to get your thoughts together, and also a chance to get some feedback from me before moving into essay 4, which is worth the most points and therefore has the most capacity to affect your grade, your overall grade for this class more than any other project or assignment this semester. So basically essay 4 is in lieu of a final for our class. So we don't have an official final exam. Our big research paper is your kind of final exam. It's your final big project for our class. I like to think about, if you play video games, of like leveling up, right? And the idea of like a final boss where every level gets kind of more difficult than the one before, and also will draw on the skills and the things that you learned from the level before. So you can think of like essay 4 as your final boss for this class in a way. So it's not just an isolated assignment, it is putting together many of the skills that we have learned in other assignments throughout the semester. So basically it's like, show me what you've learned. Impress me, show me what you've learned in our class together this semester. When it comes to brainstorming, I really recommend, I know it can be very difficult to do this. It's one of those things that's easier said than done sometimes, but try to not judge your ideas. Try to really just let them flow onto the paper as you're writing them. And the point of a brainstorming activity is just to get the ideas out there. And then step 2 is to analyze those ideas. So that at that point you can look at them with some judgment and decide, would this work for this particular assignment, yes or no? And that's the point when you can look at things like page length, for example, right? I like to think of that example of Goldilocks, right? Where she says, this porridge is too hot, this porridge is too cold kind of thing. But it's like, oh, this paper would be way too long. There's way too many ideas to explore here. Someone could write an entire book about this versus, oh, there's not enough here actually to explore and to fill up the page limit. Like this is just right? So that's one thing that you would be looking at. Other things might be, if you can find enough sources about that topic, if you personally are passionate enough or interested in writing about that topic, or if it's something that maybe you're really interested in, but you're like really emotionally activated by it and find it super upsetting to write about, it might not be the best to bring into the school space, at least at this point where you're being asked to write from more of a place of logic and ethics. So if it's something that you do feel like you can't really get past the emotional response for, it might not be perfect for this essay. Maybe save that for a blog post, or maybe just save it for something to write about in the future. So I have posted the prompt and rubric for both microtheme 6, as well as essay 4. So your final projects that go together, do read through those prompts and rubrics very carefully, please, and then do let me know if you have any questions. But basically, what is being asked of you here is to write about a text and connect it to a current cultural phenomenon, conversation, that kind of thing. So think about, you've got two things that you are building a bridge between and that you're bringing together for this assignment. One is a text. And when we're talking about a text in this case, we're really talking about an artifact, right? It could be so many things. It could be really outside of what is considered like the normal academic box for a text. So I think the obvious one when it comes to a text is reading something, right? Like reading something in your book, maybe a chapter or an essay or a short story. And yes, all of those are texts and all of those would work wonderfully for this assignment. But you do not have to limit yourself to a traditional written text. You could also use a documentary. A movie could be your text. Now, I would say be careful with something like a documentary or a movie because, again, length and page limit. So think about how many pages you're writing versus how much there is to say about a movie. So a music video might actually be better than a movie because, again, just thinking about what we're looking for here, as always, is just depth. right? So I would rather have you choose something that's shorter that you can really dive into deeply than to choose something that is larger but that you can only kind of skim the surface of. So a music video would be great. A video game would be great. What else? Like an advertisement, or like a solid advertisement, like a photograph in a magazine, as well as like an advertisement like you see on television, a commercial. That's the word I'm looking for, right? A commercial would work really well for this assignment. A PSA sent out, like smoking cigarettes are bad for you, public service announcement, any of those kinds of things would work well. So if you have any questions, you can always send me an email and ask. I'm happy to have Zoom meetings as well to discuss that further. But again, you will be getting feedback on your microtheme 6 as well. So that will be an opportunity where you could ask me some questions about, would this text be appropriate or otherwise. So that's one thing that you'll be doing, is having the text, and then what you're uniting that text to is a cultural conversation or phenomenon. Now, I'll give you some examples of what I mean by that, but just thinking about what is going on in contemporary America 2020. Obviously, the big one that is probably coming to mind for everyone is COVID-19, because that is impacting all of our lives to the point that I am recording this video right now instead of talking to you all about this final assignment in a classroom. So COVID-19 and anything going along with that, right? The idea of quarantine and all of these kinds of the first, and what this means in a larger cultural context could be definitely something to write about. There's just a lot of other movements that you can think about, and you can Google online as well to find others. You don't have to use any of these. These are just some examples. But body positivity, mental health awareness, the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, social media and false information, which is something that we obviously have spent quite a bit of time talking about in this class with our media literacy unit. And you can also think about the links between that one to things like free speech versus censorship, right? So that's just one avenue out of many, many avenues that you could choose to explore. Also minimalism, I'm seeing a lot about that movement these days. So minimalism kind of versus consumerism. So having less things, downsizing, tiny houses, living in tiny houses instead of larger houses, those kinds of things, having less clothes in your closet, sticking to just basic colors. I'm hearing a lot about that in the cultural consciousness these days. So that would be an idea. Obviously, the topic of climate change is something impending and impacting all of us to some degree or another. A few years ago, there was the Occupy Wall Street movement, and then just the Occupy movement. Another one is the rise in social anxiety. So you can see that that's just a quick list that I made for you here. If we were in class together, I would ask you all for some and just generate a list on the board just so that we can kind of get an idea of what we're talking about here. You do not have to use any of those ideas off of the list. So those are just ideas to get you started, hopefully so that you can kind of get the idea of what genre we're looking for here, what is being asked of you, and if you're really not sure what to write about and one of those things interests you, go for it. If you already have an idea or 6 ideas that you're trying to choose between, if there's something you're very passionate about, write about that. So go towards what interests you. With this, especially with all of your assignments, but especially with this final one, since it is the biggest project, you will be spending the most time working on it comparatively to how much time we have dedicated to other projects. So definitely think about what interests you. Don't just choose something random. Don't necessarily choose the first thing that came to you if it doesn't actually meet your interests, because there's just no need to bore yourself like that, right? As well as I really do believe that you will write a better paper if you're writing about something that you want to learn about anyway. So think about this as an opportunity to learn more about and to write about something that you're interested in anyway. Maybe it's something you already know a lot about. Maybe it's something that you'll have to do some research about because you're really not sure what you think about it. Or just what all the information and the data and the facts are, of course being careful to separate between what is actual facts and what is just things that are perpetrated on social media or in general in our larger cultural conversations that are not true. Okay, so basically what you are being asked to do is to connect these two things. A text to a larger cultural conversation. And you can see the spaciousness in both of those things. So a text can be so many different things, and that larger cultural conversation can be so many things. So you are being asked to use critical thinking and build a bridge between those two things. So the text itself should not necessarily have anything to do with the conversation. So basically, another way of saying that is I'm asking you to make an argument about the text in your final 2 assignments for this class, your final 2 larger assignments. You'll have still some journals and small things like that that are participation points, but we just have 2 bigger grades left in here. So it's not a book report. It's not just kind of regurgitating what other people say about this topic. That's not what we're looking for here. That would be an informational essay, right? An informational essay is an essay that is just saying, like, summarizing, right? So in this class, we've talked about the difference between summarizing something versus making an argument. So making an argument means that someone else can and should disagree with your thesis statement. They should be able to have a debate with you about your thesis statement, and someone has to be able to debate you using rationality, right? So you can disagree and you can think that they're wrong, but it can't just be someone who just flat out literally does not make any sense, right? So if you're saying a fact, like if you're just saying a fact, like, the sky is blue, that's not a great fact, because actually if you break it down, it's a lot more complicated than that. So, right, whatever it is, like smoking can cause cancer, right? That would be an informational essay. If you were to write about all the different ways that smoking can cause cancer, how we learned about that, all the nitty-gritty things about the cancer and what may or may not actually help it in the end or whatever, that's an informational essay. Now, an argumentative essay would be, just one example on that topic, would be the American government should ban smoking cigarettes because they cause cancer, right? So an informational essay is just the fact and nothing but the fact. No one can argue with that. I mean, some crazy person can argue with it, but they would just be wrong, right? It's as simple as that. So an argument is what you do with the information. So you take it somewhere and in this particular argument that I just used as an example is a proposal, right? A call to action. We should do this. There's other kinds of arguments, and you'll be talking a lot more about that in English 102, which is focused all on arguments. But we're trying to kind of give you a leg up for that class so that you'll be ahead and really ready to go next semester in English 102, which is, again, of course, a required class for everyone at SIUE. So someone can and should be able to reasonably disagree with your thesis statement. It does not have to be a proposal essay like the example I just gave, and in fact, I wouldn't necessarily even recommend having a proposal thesis statement for this. It just doesn't fit as neatly into the assignment. The argument should be about the text itself. Now, I posted 2 examples of that on Blackboard for you, and what they are doing is arguing about the movie The Joker that came out last year. So you can see 2 examples of thesis statements from this example. I myself have not actually seen The Joker, not that version that came out last year, although after having read these essays, I'm somewhat inspired to watch it now. But that doesn't really matter. It's not really about the text itself, it's about the argument that they're making, just to kind of serve as a model for you. So regardless of if you've seen it or not seen it, it still can serve as a model because it made sense to me and I haven't seen it myself, which is also a good example in terms of what your papers should be doing. Remember that anything that you write in this class this semester, it should be able to be lifted out of the class. So you could publish it in a newspaper, for example, the Alestle here on campus, or in your local newspaper, or submit it to an essay competition or anything like that. So it should always, your papers in this class, they should always make sense to someone who has not read the text. So thinking about the basic essay outline, in your introduction, you should be orienting your reader to the topic, and part of that is explaining what this text is, some basic information about the text, enough that someone, so thinking about like your essay evaluation of you were asked specifically to tell us, what is the genre, when did this come out, what is it about, those kinds of basic things, so that if someone is not familiar, they can still appreciate your evaluation. In the same way, you'll want to give some background in your introduction for this final series of 2 assignments on both the text as well as the cultural phenomenon. So in these 2 essays that I posted, I will read those thesis statements for you now, just so that you can get the idea here. So the thesis statement of 1 is, far from a call for violence, the film is a desperate, plaintive cry for help, an indictment of a society that ignores the mentally ill within it, calling for more treatment for those afflicted when the tragedy occurs, only to forget about them once the next news cycle begins. So basically, that paper, you can see already just from that thesis statement, that article is praising the Joker. And it's saying, hey, this movie is basically, it's raising awareness for mental health unwellness in our country. It's saying that they do not have enough resources and that we can do better, basically. And so it's saying that this movie is advocacy for mental unwellness, right? For mental health and topics surrounding that in our country, and saying that basically what we're doing right now is not enough and things need to be better so that we can help people who are struggling with these kinds of things, so that we don't have these kinds of tragedies happen as a result of people not getting the help that they need, right? So it's coming from a place of compassion for the Joker, who apparently, from the background that I read and just from the other Batman movies that I have seen, obviously has had a lot of trauma in his life that has led to him becoming this supervillain, right? So that paper, by the way, that article, I will say that I didn't think that it did a great job. I think it actually did a really bad job of providing enough textual evidence to back up that point. So I just wanted to throw that out there as you're looking at it as a reference and as a model. Know that your papers will require a lot more textual evidence, which again is specific examples from the text itself to back up your points. They kind of just leave that claim. It is their thesis statement, but they kind of leave it hanging there. And I wish that there was more specific examples. Basically, an argument, you're trying to convince your reader. So you want to give them specific examples so that you can show them that you're right. Basically, think that your reader is someone who does not currently agree with you, but could if you provide a convincing enough argument. So I did read other articles and on the internet about the same topic, and I did find that there is actually quite a bit of textual evidence from this movie that could support that thesis. So I don't really know why it wasn't included in this particular article, but I just wanted to throw that out there as some food for thought. So it is a model, but it's not a perfect model for what you should be doing. It would not receive an A if that article was submitted for this particular assignment. Now, that was one of 2 articles that you need to read for this week, like I said. The second one, the thesis statement is the troubled supervillain perpetuates damaging stereotypes. So as you can see, this one is from the exact opposite standpoint, right? It's saying that the Joker is perpetrating dangerous stereotypes about people who are mentally unwell. So the one is saying, hey, this movie's doing great things, mental health advocacy, and the other one is saying, no, it's actually perpetuating stereotypes and doing a bad thing. It's really interesting, isn't it, that these 2 writers, they both watched the same movie, but then walked away with complete opposite conclusions. So whatever you're writing about in a text, again, you're making an argument. Somebody else can and should be able to make a different argument about that text than the one that you are making. We all come from different backgrounds. We have different perceptions. We notice different things in a particular text that we're looking at. And that's kind of the beauty of it, right? It takes all different kinds of people to make the world go round. And I think we can learn a lot from each other, especially by talking to people who disagree with us and reading the viewpoints of people who have different viewpoints than us. If we're just always kind of in an echo chamber and only listening to people who think the same exact things that we do, there's not a lot of room for growth there, is there? You might want to begin, as you're getting ready and preparing for your Microtheme 6 in Essay 4, you might want to begin with questions. So that could be part of your brainstorming process. You have had practice with writing questions for academic research and previous assignments that we have had. So remember that good questions for academic research are neutral, they are objective, and that they're genuine questions. So if you're just asking a question that you already think that you know the answer to, and you're asking it in such a way that the answer would be obvious to anyone reading the question, it's not really a question, is it? So some examples from the Joker movie that we were just talking about would be, does the Joker help or harm the public's perception of mental illness? So you're asking, is it doing this thing or is it doing this thing, which you might notice to be a binary. So a question would be, is that a false binary, right? Is it maybe doing something completely outside of that box altogether? That would be an important question as well. But basically just asking some questions to investigate from a place of curiosity, right? So questions about just the relationship between your text and the cultural phenomenon. So I'll post some questions in my announcement that I'm going to send out on this section that you can kind of like insert your particular text into and the particular cultural phenomenon that you're looking at. So just questions of like, how does this thing change our understanding of this thing? Or how is this thing significant in the light of this thing? So that is all for now. Like I said, feel free to contact me if you have any questions. Make sure that you do read through the prompts very thoroughly, the rubrics. I would recommend reading first the prompt and rubric for your final essay, and then reading through the prompt and rubric for microtheme 6, because microtheme 6 is basically laying the groundwork for essay 4. So if you don't know what essay 4 is, then microtheme 6 isn't really going to make a whole lot of sense, because basically microtheme 6 is working towards that final project and kind of laying some of the groundwork out for it, doing a little bit of self-reflection, a chance for you to ask any questions to me about it. So keep up the great work, and I look forward to reading your final projects.